We got Michael.
Good evening, everyone. It is the Police Accountability Commission meeting for Monday, December 1st. Not sure how that happened. And we'll go ahead and do the call of order roll call. Cecilia is absent. Shauna?
Here.
Zachary? Don?
Yep.
Mohammed? Angela here, and Cicely.
It's Shana.
What did I say? I said Shauna.
And how we
Shane.
Just I had to ask as well. That was Zachariah.
Oh, that's all.
It's okay.
The next thing is brief announcements from staff, commissioners, and council liaison. Peter?
Yeah, Gloria, I forgot to say Gloria will not be able to be with us tonight. And I don't have any announcements.
Does anybody else have any announcements that they would like to make?
Change something, is that looking?
Yes, no? Apparently there are no announcements. Public comment, public comment, if anybody in the public would like to address anything on the consent calendar, please do so at that time. If you are not able to attend at that particular time and have something you'd like to bring up, please bring up. And right now, we do have one public, but she has let me know that she will wave at me if she has any questions she wants to ask. So there are none. Okay, consent calendar. Under the consent calendar, what we're looking for is approval of the minutes. Would somebody like to make a motion to approve the minutes as presented?
Second.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Any abstentions?
No, but I did have a question.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Were those corrections that were coming on the email, were those for those minutes or the agenda that's?
It's the agenda.
Oh, well, I just wanted to make sure everything was on there.
Oh, I didn't make a motion to approve the agenda. Was there a change on the agenda?
Just some of the headers on the papers. The dates need to be corrected, so I'll just correct them for the next meeting.
Okay, all right, thank you. Sorry, I missed that.
No worries.
Any public would like to speak about the agenda or the consent calendar? Seeing none. We'll go on to the regular items, and then this is Davis Police Chief Todd Henry presenting. Please.
Good evening, commissioners. Give us 1 second to pull up the PowerPoint here. We're gonna share the screen, so.
So I have this, I'm trying to do. This stuff.
Okay, good evening, commissioners. Tonight, we're gonna be talking about two things. The title is somewhat misleading. We are gonna talk about large event security, but we're also gonna talk about downtown, safety.
Oh, yeah, where's? It's a no. No, or it should be on.
Oh, there it is. Okay, and that's the end of the presentation. If you have any questions, please let us know. Okay, so obviously, large scale events, the city of Davis has hundreds of events throughout the year. We have a permitting process for those, and they can vary in size from probably our largest, which is Picnic Day, where 70,000 people come into the city. To, a small event that's just a single road closure. So the purpose of police involvement in any planned, especially a large scale or complex event, is protection of life and safety, maintain order, enable safe event operations, rapid response if there's an emergency, whether that's law enforcement related or medical related, crime prevention and deterrence. So we always do kind of a risk assessment process. So when somebody wants to get permitted for a large scale event, whatever that may be, and it could involve a multitude of different departments. That can involve basically at a big park. It could involve a road closure, such as a parade or just an event that's on a road. Essentially, a community member or an organization submits that permit to either the police department or parks or both, depending on what kind of permit they're trying to obtain. We get a gauge as to the size and scale of the event. So how many people do they think are going to attend? Is there going to be alcohol present, duration, time of day, date of the week? And then also past incidents. So if we've had previous large scale events where there's been concerns or public safety issues, we take that into consideration, especially when we're kind of deciding what are going to be the conditional use factors that we're going to include in that permit. So for example, if somebody was going to have a large event that was going to have a 1-day ABC or alcohol permit, we may require them to put up fencing, we may require them to have security. We could also maybe require that they would have off-duty police officers that work in what's called an extra duty capacity, where they're actually contracted through the city for that specific event. There's a litany of other things that.
Do you mind if I ask a question, just a question about that?
Sure.
With, sorry, I don't mean to interrupt. If I'm doing the flow, I can hold my questions for the end. It's just about the, when officers, sort of off duty or contracted to go work an event or something like that, is that reimbursed by the community organizer of the event and the permitter or the permittee, I suppose?
Correct.
The hours of that officer at the time?
Yes, so what we do is we have a standardized extra duty rate, which are utilized by a bunch of different entities within the city, outside of just large events. And essentially it's a fixed rate. And so what they do is they contract with the city. They have to provide their own insurance, but essentially they hire a police officer to work a set number of hours specific to that event. So they're not essentially working for the city per se, they're working in a contract capacity for that individual, but obviously they're using police equipment, police uniform. They have all the same authority that they would, working in a normal capacity, but they're essentially working for somebody.
Thanks.
So those factors all kind of are taken into consideration when we're looking at the permit and deciding what kind of safety conditions that we may impose on the applicant. A lot of other things that we look at is layout and access. Where is the event going to be? Is it going to affect traffic? Obviously, if there's a parade or road closure, those can require closure of a street. There's a couple different ways that we can approach that. We can either put conditions on the event organizer to put up their own road barricades, because one of our concerns is always either intentional or unintentional vehicle entering into a closed road space, which, if you've watched the news, that seems to be a more common occurrence throughout the nation. The other thing that we may also do is, based on the size and scale of it, we can bring in our own road barricades, which the city doesn't own, but part of a regional mutual aid asset. We have access to actual barricades and close down a street. Weather considerations. Is there potential for people to get overheated, especially in the summer months of the year? Medical access, we coordinate with the fire department and EMS to ensure that we have a plan in place. So if they have to respond, they have ingress and egress routes to wherever the event is. We might also may be doing traffic control. So if there's a large scale parade or demonstration and people want to do a march actually in the streets, they can petition for a permit to close the streets. And then we have what is called kind of a rolling blockade, where essentially officers will block intersections as the group moves through them. And then obviously we do a criminal and terror threat assessment. That's done through CCIC, which is the Centralized California Threat Assessment Center. They're in coordination with FBI. What we do is we send essentially the event, the information related to it, and they do an assessment to let us know if there's any concerns related to a targeted attack or potentially terrorist attack. So the actual event planning is pretty involved. Each one of these events, obviously depending on the scale of it, is going to have what's called an event action plan, which is part of ICS Incident Command Structure, which is a national system for essentially organizing a large scale response, whether that's to wildfire, public disturbance, all the way to the 4th of July parade. So we use this system because it's standardized. And so if we do ask for mutual aid to respond, they can pick up our actual plan and understand how to read it and where to find information that's important to them. There's a multitude of different components that go through that, and depending on the scale of it, it just gets larger. A large scale event will have what's called an entire command staff. So you have an incident commander, which is a sole, manager with the police department, potentially with the fire department, depending on the nature of the event and what discipline's kind of running it. And then you also have an operations section, a logistics section, you'll have an admin finance section, and then there's a planning section. And so if you're familiar with a large wildfire event where you have thousands of firefighters assigned to the incident, including hundreds of police officers, this is the exact same format they use for that, but it's scalable. So we can obviously use it for a small event, it's just less in depth, or we can move it up to an event that's significant in nature. Emergency lanes, making sure that, again, access for emergency vehicles, fire is accessible, vendor placement, how close they're going to be, are they going to be close to a thoroughfare? Is there concerns with traffic moving around an event, security staffing? So if somebody is planning a large scale event and we ask that they hire security based on the size of it, or basically the likelihood of there being alcohol served there, then they would have to present us with the company that's going to be providing the service so that we can sort of vet that company and make sure that we're comfortable with it. And then again, we do the medical planning, which is in conjunction with EMS and fire department to come up with a response for, regular medical conditions that may occur at an event like that. But also in case we have a mass casualty incident, what's going to be the protocol? How are we going to respond efficiently? Where's going to be staging areas? How are we going to transport all those things? And then again, as I mentioned earlier, extra police resources. Obviously, if it's an event not co-sponsored by the city, then if somebody wants extra police officers assigned to that event, or we require them to have extra police officers assigned to that event, then again, that event organizer or individual contracts with the city to bring in those additional resources. So interagency coordination, nothing worse than a silo. So every time we're putting together any of these plans, we're making sure that we're having communication and sharing the plan with all entities within the city, potentially the region, and sometimes outside of our region. When we talk about our region, it's obviously the Sacramento Valley region. We designate the county of Yolo as our operational area. So a lot of times when we have a large scale event, what we will do is reach out to our partners in our operational area, which is Yolo County, and we'll coordinate with them in case we do need mutual aid response, or if we think an event is going to exceed our capabilities, we will ask for mutual aid ahead of time. That's kind of complex because those agencies are not getting reimbursed for that. So if we ask for mutual aid and they send bodies, they don't get reimbursed unless there's a declaration of an emergency, which is a whole nother process into itself. And if that occurs, then eventually a Stafford Act reimbursement comes along and everybody gets reimbursed for any resources they deployed to that specific emergency. But the normal course of business is that's what we do is informal mutual aid. So we can call Yolo County Sheriff's Department and they will send resources to us, and there's reciprocity. We will obviously send resources to them too. And everybody understands that you're not going to get reimbursed, but that's the only way that we are able to accomplish some of the things that we need to accomplish. We talked to traffic engineers, the event organizer, and as I just mentioned, making sure that mutual aid is in place, other city departments are aware of what's occurring. And that's also part of our permitting process. So there's actually a subgroup amongst all the departments that issue permits for special events. So that we're coordinating with each other that, hey, this event organizer has requested use of a park. And they're also asking for a 1-day alcohol permit so that we both are on the same page as to what's being permitted and we both have an understanding as to what the scale of the event is going to be. So crowd management is always a huge component. Obviously, there's a lot of factors that can kind of change that. As I mentioned, alcohol is a tough one because it can change the dynamics sometimes of an event. Obviously, the scale of it, the size of it, how many people are going to attend it. We obviously want to look at the space and make sure that there's multiple egress routes for people that are in it and that we don't have any concerns about that. We implement rapid response teams, so those are pre-designated. So if an incident does occur, they're in a position to quickly be able to address the incident and be mobile enough to be able to get to the incident itself. And then UAS, which are unmanned aerial surveillance or drones. A lot of times, especially for parades that are on streets, we'll use the UAS just to see what's coming ahead. One of our biggest concerns with any type of protest or demonstration is counter-protest, counter-demonstration. And so being able to have good situational awareness to see if another group is going to intersect with the primary group who's already permitted is always a concern of ours. And so the more information we have, the more rapidly we can respond and hopefully mitigate any concerns. Perimeter access and control, again, vehicle barriers. There's a whole litany of those. Sometimes we ask the event host to basically supply those themselves, which they can rent, and sometimes we will require that we bring our own. Entry points, credentialing, bag policies are all considerations that we may ask for the event coordinator to engage in. And then emergency response planning, again, evacuation plan, medical surge if we have a mass casualty incident, lost child plan. We do a lot of events where this is pretty significant. I can't think of a 4th of July or picnic day where kids don't get lost. So we have a pretty good system in place to ensure that we get those kids reunited as quickly as possible, an active threat plan, and then weather response depending on the time of the year and how severe the weather may be at that time. Staffing resources, obviously overtime, mutual aid, specialized units, and then fatigue management. People can stay on these events for an extended period of time, and these officers are wearing body armor and get extremely hot. So we always have a safety officer engaged in the process, which is part of our ICS command. And what they're doing is they're evaluating the officers so that we don't have somebody fall out from heat exposure or whatever the case may be. And then at the end of it is always the cost recovery to the city. Public communication is a big thing. We try and make sure that we're proactive in letting the community know through different media that there's going to be a large event, if there's going to be road closures, if we're expecting there to be a large crowd somewhere. We always, express the desire for people to reach out to us. Obviously, we cannot have eyes on an event that, is over 1,000 people at all times. And so we always encourage the public to reach out to us if there's something concerning or they see a safety issue so that we can address it pretty quickly. And then again, social media alerts, whether that's through our social platforms or through Everbridge, where we can send out an immediate notification to a specific geolocation to let people know that, hey, an event has occurred, or there's a shelter in place, or there's an evacuation order or evacuation warning, whatever the case may be. Enforcement for authority, obviously we have local laws, ordinances, we have alcohol regulations, we have emergency orders if necessary, and then voluntary compliance is the focus. And then balancing safety and experience. Obviously, we try and create a welcoming presence. De-escalation is always at the forefront. And we really try to ensure that these events are a family-friendly approach. And that's just through collaboration with the event organizer. And then at the end of this, we do what's called an after-action review of every single one. And really what we're doing is we're kind of looking at, hey, this was our initial plan. This is how the plan was executed. Here's the issues that came up. Is there a gap, identifying those gaps? Is it a gap within our plan? Is it a gap within our resources? Is it a gap within training? Whatever the case may be, the goal is to always get better after every single incident. Hopefully we are continuously on that trajectory of improving how we plan for these and how we respond to them. And obviously, as I mentioned earlier, and I'll just kind of touch on this real quick, we do a lot of events, a substantial number of events for the city. The one event that is continuously a difficult hurdle for us is Picnic Day, because usually when we have an event, it's one event. And we have planning around it. We're in communication with the planners. A lot of thought process goes into it, and it's manageable. The problem with Picnic Day is it's 70,000 people descending into the city, and we have dozens and dozens of events simultaneously happening. So we immediately get overwhelmed as far as resources, and most of these events are not permitted and they're not planned. So they spontaneously pop up, and now we're trying to adjust to a spontaneous event. And so although all these things work really well when it's a one or two specific events in the city, they really are much more of a struggle when you're talking dozens of events simultaneously occurring. Any questions on that?
Anybody have? I have a couple. Again, talking about last year, and I'm assuming you guys are already starting to plan for next year. But you talked about bag containers being checked. Obviously, that didn't happen, but that's what whoever is putting on the event, that would be their responsibility to decide whether they want bags to be checked.
Yeah, the problem with Picnic Day is these aren't defined events. So there's no single point of entry to the event. People just show up. And obviously, the Fourth Amendment prohibits just random searching of people. Now there are some conditions that can be applied when the area is fenced off and it's by invite. And those are some restrictions that we may place on an event promoter, but obviously with Picnic Day, it's impossible.
And also, would it be possible to say that there would be nothing approved off campus, that the only events that are going to occur would be on campus? Then, of course, you would have spontaneous things rather than people going to you or to the planning department, parks department. Could that happen? I mean, let me rephrase that. Is that a possibility?
Yeah, we have traditionally never approved any permits on Picnic Day. This last Picnic Day, we approved a sound permit for a small event, which wasn't a small event, but that has been our approach. It doesn't prevent people from holding the events. So really, this is a kind of philosophical question as to, do we want to try and engage with these groups so that we can put restrictions on them? Or do we just have a flat response of, we're not going to permit anything in the city because it's not a city event, it's a university event. And as it stands right now, the position of the city is we're not going to permit anything. So there will be no permits for any events within the city on Picnic Day, just because of the size of it and literally 100 years of this event getting out of control and becoming violent. And so, is there a better way to do it? I don't know. I've reached out to many different college universities throughout the state, and very few have events like this anymore. Their legacy events are gone. There's only a couple, Santa Barbara and San Luis Obispo, or two that I can think of right off the top of my head. They also do not permit events, and they actually shut down large parts of, especially the beach in Santa Barbara, just because of the number of injuries that have occurred, assault, attacks, you name it. So I think everybody's trying to figure out how to adjust to that. Because even with 100% of our department working, which does occur, and we bring in, additional officers from CHP, Yolo County Sheriff's Office, Woodland Police Department, West Sacramento Police Department, ABC, we still do not have nearly the staffing levels that we would need. San Luis Obispo has a similar type event. They bring in 300 officers. There's just no way we would be able to accomplish that without some reimbursement. And so the reality is, it's probably better just to leave it as no permitted events for that day, and that the focus is really on the university.
So then if they're non-permitted, can you actually go to an event and break it up?
We can, but the event at Community Park, which essentially was non-sanctioned because they didn't have a park use permit, that was, probably close to 1,000 people. It took us an hour and a half with 50 officers to clear that park. So you do the math, we had 32 large scale events last picnic day. There's absolutely no way we would have the staffing to be able to clear all those. So a lot of times what we do is, if once it gets out of control, there's property damage, reports of violence, excessive drinking, whatever the case may be, then we will try and disperse the group. But that takes a lot of time, and it takes a lot of resources, and those resources are now committed to that event, which means all the other incidents and 911 calls that are coming in, and we have an excess of 300 on picnic day, they're not getting an officer response. And so it can be very difficult.
Is UCD considering canceling? I know Chico did, and you said other places have, but.
I don't believe so. Obviously, we've been in close communication with the university, post last, picnic day. Really focused on communication and education, which I think is probably the best approach. My feeling is that most of these, Greek organizations or students want to do the right thing. I think sometimes they hold these events not understanding there are people as far as Los Angeles coming up to Davis for this event. And, sometimes you're going to attract people who may have bad intentions, and that can be problematic. So we're doing a really focused effort of joint communication, making sure that, the students and the Greek organizations have a clear understanding of what is a reasonable expectation, and that there will be strict enforcement. We will be essentially doing, strict enforcement for the 24-hour period of picnic day. And we want to make sure that students know that, because our goal is obviously to get through the day with no injuries and no arrests. But we are going to take a different approach this year, because post-COVID, we had really kind of transitioned to a more advisory kind of stance. And so our enforcement posture is going to be much different this year, but we want to make sure we're communicating that to the students so they know ahead of time, so it's not a surprise. My hope is that we just get compliance, and that, part of that is that population is transitory. So any efforts we did 5 years ago are completely irrelevant today. So really it needs to be a continuous process.
Thank you.
And I have a question, is the police department the only department that, should I say, is like sort of the managing department of the permitting process, essentially, like overseeing it? Or are there other points of entry for people hosting different kinds of events? And, I don't know where it falls. I'm guessing like the farmer's market is like partially sponsored by the city or something like that. That kind of puts it in categories of its own and events like that. But I'm just curious, speaking of large events other than Picnic Day.
Yeah, no, for sure. And that's a good question. No, the police permit's not. Really, the primary permits that we issue is a road closure, an ABC license, or one-day ABC license, a sound permit if somebody wants to use amplified sound. Those are really the primary permits that we issue. But also you have Parks and Community Services, which issue overland use. So if somebody needs to drive a vehicle across a park or wants to use park space, then they issue those permits. So a lot of times they'll be in conjunction. So Parks and the PD will essentially be working the same event, but we'll be issuing separate permits for the same event depending on what the organizer wants.
Got it, thanks.
So with regard, going back to the picnic thing, so two things. One is you mentioned about the Greek Association. So is the plan is to kind of speak to all of them, perhaps a few months in advance and advise them that there will be citation and there shouldn't be an event. And so is that the type of effort that?
Yes, no, exactly. And it's it's kind of twofold. So it's us with the university communicating simultaneously. Obviously, we talk about dynamics in the city, non-permitted events, considerations if they are going to have a small scale event at a house. What the enforcement posture is going to look like for the city in compliance with, state law and ordinances. And the university is also talking about responsibilities to the university, making sure that they have a safe plan, making sure they have a plan for for people attending an event, all those dynamics. And so, for a while, it's been kind of just UC Davis messaging, hey, we need to be smart, we need to be safe, make sure that you're having a plan around what you're doing. Be thoughtful of the unintended consequences of having an event on picnic day. But now it's going to be in conjunction with the PD so that you're getting the message from both the city and the university simultaneously. And we've already started parts of that. And then obviously, as we get closer to April, we'll start ramping that up. And our intent is also to be, in person in front of some of the Greek organizations to make sure that we're kind of communicating what the expectations are.
And a follow-up on that, in terms of deterrence, is there kind of well-known area that these pop-up events could occur, or is you think pretty arbitrary?
It's really varied over the years. Parks are always a prime target for pop-ups. We've seen a lot on school campuses. Some of the difficulty is we'll displace from one park, and then obviously through social media, they can regenerate another event at another park. So, it's really kind of for the lack of a better term, whack-a-mole. So we're kind of moving from one location to another location to another location to try and manage those. Obviously, there's a lot of events that we just don't have the staffing to get to. And as long as it doesn't get to the point where there's reports of violence or vandalism, very likely that event can just self-dissolve over time. But yeah, especially when it's, there's public concern because, we get a lot of kids who overdrink and they pass out. We get a lot of reports of sexual assault on picnic day. We get a lot of physical assault on picnic day. And so obviously we're trying to manage that to the best of our ability. This year, we will be taking different strategy where we'll be using essentially, I don't want to get into the weeds on this, but like scout teams. And we're also going to be integrating other city employees. So if an event starts to develop at a park, we get a notification really soon so we can kind of get out there and get ahead of it before it gets to the point that there's 500,000 kids out there.
So just sort of a last question to wrap up. So is there kind of a plan to perhaps have the deterrence in known location? And could you potentially use some of the drone technology to try to see the movement of people,
Yep.
And finally, how many sexual assaults was reported?
I'd have to go back and look, and that's kind of been a chronic
Just like
issue.
a roughly talking about 10, 100,
No,
1,000?
no, definitely under 10.
Okay.
But yeah, we will see kind of surges during picnic day, and anytime you have thousands of kids that are intoxicated, those events occur. Okay, and then I'll move.
I just really have
Oh, yeah.
one last question, which is gonna show my ignorance. I think Davis has a policy that you can't smoke unless you're walking. Is that true? You can't stand in front of a building and smoke?
Correct.
Is that, I don't know anything about pot, but I mean, is that the same thing? Does pot fit into that too? So that if an individual, I mean, even if alcohol is sanctioned, can pot be sanctioned in an event? I just don't, because I don't do
Davis
that.
is small.
Like pot in a house?
No, I mean, like at the parks, if it was at, if their drink, if they are sanctioned for a 24-hour drink permit, is there a pot permit? I just don't.
Yeah, they can't smoke in the park.
Oh, you can?
Yeah.
Okay.
whether it be access to other people, cigarette, marijuana, whatever the case may
Okay.
be.
There's few state law opportunities for you to get special permits for events that host like cannabis, consumption in different varieties, and they're specific, so what's the bureau called, the Bureau of, I don't know, something about cannabis control or something like that. Yeah, the state has some regulations around that, but I don't know the process specifically,
But
just in case you're curious. And you want
They
to-
can't do that at these events?
No, we haven't received any requests for, and they would have to be somehow segregated space that the smoke couldn't float into a neighboring playground. I mean, there's a lot of considerations that would have to go into that, but if it was in somebody's home, obviously they're free to do as they wish.
Yeah, that was saying, I just don't know. I knew that there was a cigarette smoking one, but I didn't know the other applies.
Yeah, anywhere you can't smoke a cigarette, you can't smoke marijuana.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we'll get into downtown safety. So downtown safety has been a point of public concern for a couple of years. I think there's a variety of issues that kind of contribute to that. I'm gonna just kind of briefly go over some of the data from 2021 to 2024. So the total calls for service has steadily increased in the downtown area, and this is the downtown specific core. So in 2024, we had 9,685 calls for service in the downtown area. And as you can see, that has kind of grown on over time. The robberies that are reported in the downtown corridor has actually dropped. So in 2022, we had 10, and in 2024, we had 5. So that's a good trend, and that's what we want to see. Assaults are pretty steady. Obviously in 2023, we had a higher number of 21, but in 2024, we had 15 reported assaults. And then theft as a whole, whether that's auto theft, petty theft, grand theft, or identity theft, that has steadily increased over the years. In 2024, we had 124 reported thefts. And so, one of the biggest concerns that we get from downtown is a sense of security and safety. And a lot of that is, I think, revolves around portions of the community, especially individuals who may be SMI or SUD, or I'm sorry, serious mental illness or substance use disorder. And their behavior can be sometimes erratic and sometimes paradoxical, where people kind of struggle to figure out what they're doing, and it can be frightening to people. And that really is a very visible component that seems to be a kind of the core of frustration, at least when they're voicing it to us. Sometimes there's a law enforcement component to that. Sometimes there is not. But we do have a lot of businesses that, especially probably a year ago, 2 years ago, who were expressing frustration because employees did not feel safe downtown, so they were not working at businesses. They're having a hard time recruiting people. Obviously, there was a lot of conversation around this with city council. And ultimately they decided on the downtown beat officer, which was a single police officer position, but assigned solely to downtown. That officer is not really assigned to calls for service. The core of what that officer does is really be responsive to community members downtown, but also businesses. That officer is highly visible. They're downtown their entire shift, which is a 10-hour shift. And they do a lot of check-ins with businesses. They do a lot of communication with Downtown Business Association. They do a lot of interaction with the chamber. What they try and do is find root causes to some of these issues and then address them. That can be enforcement, that could be citations, that could be arrests, that could just be mere presence. It could also be coordinating with other stakeholders in the community, whether that's a homeless outreach team or our clinicians. to try and kind of coordinate bringing resources in for individuals that either need services, and the criminal justice process is really not the right answer. But there's also, we have a series of people who have, I would say a very small number, but we do have a series of people who have been chronic offenders when it comes to harassing businesses, destroying business property, whatever the case is. So one of the routes that the downtown beat officer works through is called Data-Driven Intervention Program, which is run through the District Attorney's Office, the Yolo County District Attorney's Office. And what it is the way the system works right now, if you're arrested for a low-level offense, you get booked and you get released. And so that individual never actually gets to a preliminary hearing or an arraignment to be able to see a judge. And so it's very difficult if, depending on the severity or how often this person's being arrested, to actually get them connected to any services through the criminal justice system. So they're in this perpetual cycle of arrest, release, release. So the district attorney's office came up with this program where essentially once somebody's had a number 10 arrests within a year, then they can hold them till they can get to arraignment. This allows the individual to get in front of a judge, so the district attorney can kind of paint the entire picture of, hey, we've had this many interactions. Here's all the low-level crimes this individual's been involved in, and whether that's pretrial diversion, mental health court, drug court, whatever the case may be, that now gives that judge the authority and the ability to be able to hopefully compel them to some kind of treatment, to be able to get a better resolution than just this perpetual cycle of arrest and release, which is not usually helpful. The other piece too that's been integrated is restraining orders. So we've had multiple businesses who've had the same individual threaten them, scare employees, whatever the case is. And so those businesses have gone to get a civil restraining order, which has been pretty effective. So there are areas where individuals can no longer go into that business without risking arrest. So again, these are all small pieces to a big puzzle of how we try and be kind of that centerpiece for businesses, community members that are experiencing some of this, and how we're able to bring to bear different resources, and whether that's law enforcement or somebody else, but kind of be a traffic controller to make sure those resources are getting where they need to be, so that we can hopefully find resolution to some of these ongoing issues.
So with regards to kind of the coordination between these theft or crimes and the unsheltered population in downtown, especially we have this sort of, I guess, a nice G Street between Second and Third is kind of blocked off with chairs and everything, and supposed to be like a place that people will sit outside and enjoy the restaurant. But then this is the main sort of encampment and of unsheltered individual, and it's been there for many years. It's been there before the planning of turning that into a place of restaurants and so forth, outdoor sitting. Are there things being done or need to be done in order to clear that?
Yes, it's very complex. So obviously, if there's a clear violation of the law, somebody's drinking in a container or whatever the case may be, there can be an enforcement component to that. The downtown beat officer will also make contact with those individuals. Our goal is always to try and first transition people to services. A lot of times people are service resistant, and you may have to make contact 20, 30, 40 times before somebody's in space to be able to take those resources. We also work closely with the homeless outreach team, which is through Housing and Social Services. And so, a lot of times they'll approach them, we may approach them, we may approach them together. And the goal is to find a service that maybe meets their needs, and then help them to transition into that. Again, sometimes people want to engage in that, sometimes they're just not ready to engage in that. So it does take some patience But obviously the key there is also too, if there's criminal conduct, the downtown beat officer is there to address it. We do get a lot of complaints, and most of the complaints are, hey, I saw this person downtown. And our response is, it's not illegal for them to be downtown, as long as they're not violating the law, then obviously they have a right just as much as anybody else to be down there. I know it can be frustrating for community members because, you know, sometimes encampments obviously bring trash, they bring other issues, get a lot of complaints of hypodermic syringes, drug paraphernalia, you name it. So we're constantly trying to work on that, but there's no real simple solution because the question is, we can displace, but where do we displace them to? And, you know, that becomes problematic too. So obviously the focus is enforce the law where appropriate, but also try and work to transition as many people as we can to any type of service that we can.
I'm wondering if we have any kind of studies that we have made or that have been made for us to try to understand the characteristics, any commonalities among people who habitually cause these disturbances or make others uncomfortable in the downtown or any other part of the city. Are there any patterns or any studies of any kind that guide us, or is it pretty much a catch as catch can, take it as it comes and deal with it as wisely as possible? I don't have firsthand experience with this, so I'm having a little trouble picturing a few of the things that you and the chief have been describing. I'm just wondering how much of a science there is available to guide any kind of a pattern of response to repeated situations that could be somewhat classified and understood. Or in addition to that, are there certain individuals, you mentioned someone facing the police as often as 10 times in a year and maybe less than a year. So I wonder, I have some understanding of the legalities in terms of prior restraint and so forth, and I appreciate that we have, whatever we do, we have to do with respect for the rights of all involved. It seems to me a very complex issue that I haven't really thought about before, but tonight you're describing some situations that are new to me, that there are people, and I can understand that there would be, especially with the university adjacent, that there would be some people who are just disturbed in one way or another, and behave in ways that makes them identifiable as problem people that we'd rather not be around and that sort of thing. So you mentioned coordination with social services. I'm very interested in that. But I think my fundamental question is just how much do we know? How much data do we have that guides us either in terms of certain individuals that keep popping up, as you say, 10 times a year, in the extreme, or are there calls that you receive that create a knowledge base of, well, this particular store or this particular restaurant seems to be a hangout that results in problems, so we have to adjust our coverage, speaking from your perspective, from the police perspective. We have to adjust our coverage, or is it just take it as it comes? I mean, how much data and how much planning and training do we have access to in these situations?
Well, there's a lot to unpack there. We use a lot of data. The individuals that, we have numerous contacts with, every officer in the city knows who they are because we probably have hundreds of contacts a year with each one of them. You know, I don't think it's almost impossible to just put people into boxes necessarily to say, hey, this is the causation of this. I would say that for the individuals that kind of cause the most concern to community members, one of the most, common underlying factors is serious mental illness, diagnosed, undiagnosed, or dual diagnosis with substance use disorder, and they may be self-medicating through substance use disorder. And those do cause, can cause pretty erratic behavior, which is very visible and concerning. And I would say that's probably the vast majority. I mean, I can think of 10 people off the top of my head right now that we have almost daily contact with, and they all fall into that category. But again, we do know kind of migration patterns and where people hang out and where they don't. And our goal is to, look at that space and use crime prevention through environmental design. Is there something about the space that's inviting? Is there something that, lends itself to people wanting to loiter in that area? And we try and make adjustments in that space. Obviously, when it comes to enforcement, the people that we get the calls on the most are the ones that we're gonna have the most contact with. And we try and treat them all individually, right? Trying to identify where are they at and, what resources are in place. Obviously, we want people to voluntarily engage in treatment. That is not always the case. And so even though I'm not a big proponent of arrest being the answer to everything, we have many examples where somebody was dealing with SMI untreated or substance use disorder, and they enter the criminal justice system. The court quickly recognizes, right? There's, pretrial diversion on a multitude of different levels. But they quickly recognize this person really needs support. And so we're going to compel them to get treatment. They refer to it as the two-door option. You volunteer for treatment and you stay consistent with it, you don't have to be in jail. If not, you may end up in jail. And we have seen cases where that has been successful. I don't think it's successful every time, but it is an option that is available. And, this, without dragging this conversation out too long, I do have real concerns about how we address serious mental illness that's untreated. Because essentially we have no tool outside of receivership, which is a very complex process, to be able to get somebody who needs help to that help. And that is heartbreaking for me as a human being to watch that occur. Because essentially we just have to be like, we're gonna leave you to your own devices, which I think is irresponsible. But with the way the system is built right now, we don't really have a tool to be able to force that person to get the treatment.
That brings me to my next question. In response, is there enough facility? Are there, when you find an individual that that you want to refer, are you able to find the help? Does the county or whatever sources we have, is there enough social service available, in your opinion and in your experience? Is there enough service available, or are we in a situation where sometimes you just have to let it go because there's no place to send them?
Well, we can't just send them, so they gotta want to be sent. But no, I don't think there's probably sufficient, and that's much
There are
longer
facilities enough
conversation.
at this point.
Well, when you say facilities, so when I think of like substance use disorder, I think of in-house residential treatment programs, which are very structured, right? There's obviously outpatient where it's a daily check-in, but those are different dynamics. And I think at the end of the day, do I think we need more? Yes, 100% across the board. I also think we just need more tools to be able to get people to the place where they can be treated. And I can tell you a multitude of people who once medicated and under a doctor's supervision showed dramatic improvement, dramatic improvement. They, went from no shoes living on the street to some level of stability. But as the system is set up right now, for the most part, it requires voluntary compliance. There are some exceptions to that, a very few.
Okay. Thank you.
Anyone else? I just have a real quick question. You said that the officer that is downtown works 10-hour shifts, so I'm assuming that's 4 days.
Mhm.
So are there only 4 days that downtown has been covered then? Okay.
Yeah, well, there's always a beat officer. Downtown is in beat two. So as you know, there's 4 police officers that work at any given time here in the city. There's always a beat officer assigned to that beat. But they're obviously taking calls throughout the entire beat, which is much larger than just downtown. So they're never gonna have the ability to spend extended periods of time down there, but obviously the downtown beat officer, that's all they're focused on.
Okay, any public comment? Seeing none? Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Chief, really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. And wow, on all the things that you have to do for getting committees, this like picnic day, that was overwhelming. The next thing is the police auditor update, so we will hear from either Michael and or Stephen.
Thank you, Chair. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. I'll be covering this segment of the agenda. One of the things that I try to keep up on, of course, in as part of our work, is to be current with what is going on in the legal field. And we talked last meeting about AI. I'm going to talk today about a Supreme Court case that came down last month. But I'll set the stage a little bit with the information that I provided and is included in your agenda handout. What I have provided are 2 different kinds of complaint forms. So under state law, every police agency is required to come up with a process for receiving complaints and investigating complaints alleging misconduct against its officers. There isn't a whole lot more guidance on what is needed in order to complete or satisfy that responsibility. But every agency sort of has developed their own complaint forms in response to that law. I selected San Diego County because I've done some work there, but also because of some information in their complaint form that became the subject of a Supreme Court case. So what San Diego complaint form does, according, as you can see in the materials that have been provided to you, goes through sort of the process, which is helpful and informative, and then goes through how you go about making the complaint, et cetera, et cetera. As a preamble to actually filing the complaint, all this information is provided to a person who may be considering filing a complaint. But if you look at one paragraph in that lead up to the complaint form itself, included in that material is the following sentence. It is against the law to make a complaint that you know to be false. If you make a complaint against an officer, knowing that it is false, you can be prosecuted on a misdemeanor charge. Does anyone think that that might have an impact on the willingness of somebody who's thinking about making a complaint to make a complaint? I thought I heard a yes.
Yeah, it's actually interesting because I did look up the 2 penal codes And I asked Chief Henry about it. He made comment that he felt that the one that should be removed from Sandy.
Yeah, right. So this is a state law actually that tells police agencies that you have to include this language in any of your complaint forms. Um, and there has been litigation over the past 20 plus years relating to this, but the law has been very uncertain. So there hasn't been a lot of guidance about whether, in fact, agencies should include this language or should not. And finally, the California Supreme Court last month came up with a decision. And the decision was that this language should not be in a complaint form and that this language is, in fact, unconstitutional. Um, because of, according to the Supreme Court, and it was an 8-1 decision, but the majority decided that this language could well dissuade individuals who wanted to make a complaint from making a complaint. Because under their logic, um, you got to think of it from the potential complainant's perspective. Potential complainant is already probably going to have a level of mistrust about how seriously any complaint is going to be handled, particularly if that complaint is going to be investigated by the agency itself. And then, of course, added to that, if you read this, it's going to be up to the agency to decide, at least at first blush, whether or not that complaint is a false complaint. And that agency would then go around and go to the DA with a suggestion to file a misdemeanor case against the complainant if the agency believed it was false. You can see how that could really get in the way of receiving complaints because the complainant's going to be nervous about whether or not his or her complaint is going to be considered to be false by the agency upon which the complainant is complaining about, which is a little upside down. So the California Supreme Court, as I said, invalidated this language. And so San Diego is going to need to remove that verbiage from its complaint form, as many other agencies in the state of California that still have that language. The good news is that the Davis Police Department for years has not gone with that language. Based on some of the lower level, the lower appellate court opinions that raised some questions about the legitimacy of that language, Davis got rid of that language years ago. And I've included the language of Davis about what potential complainants are informed about how to make a complaint against the Davis Police Department, as well as the actual form that is online that a complainant can fill out and submit to the Davis Police Department, and an investigation will get underway. And you will notice if you go through the 6 or 7 pages, there's no language like what I read to you in the Davis complaint form. To its credit, the other thing I would say is that having read maybe 100 different agencies' complaint forms, I have found that the Davis Police Department's complaint form to be one of the best ones in the state. It's very easy to read. It's understandable. It provides detail. It actually, instead of discouraging or chilling a complaint, I think it welcomes complaints or comments. And the other thing I like about it is that it talks about making an inquiry or complaint. So even if you don't know whether or not the officer committed misconduct, you can use the same form to make an inquiry, which will then be answered by, supervisors at the Davis Police Department. So that is it for today, but certainly be able to answer any questions. But I thought that you all should have exposure to what potential complainants would see if they went online, thinking about making a complaint against Davis Police Department. And that's all I have, unless anyone has any questions.
Is there an avenue for making an anonymous complaint if you don't want your identity to be known?
The answer to that is yes. Davis does accept anonymous complaints. The problem with anonymous complaints is that oftentimes the information doesn't give a police department a lot to go on. There's no one to get any further details. Sometimes that's okay, but many times the complaint is what it is. There's no witnesses identified, so it's very difficult to proceed on anonymous complaints. So one of our roles as the independent police auditor is when a potential complainant comes to us, we talk through that and some of the obstacles and challenges that the police department would have in investigating a complaint that's anonymous. That being said, if the complainant really wants to be anonymous, the complainant can continue to be anonymous.
Yeah, a couple questions. The first is, I haven't actually looked onto the website for the different resources we may have to file complaints. Is there a form input option where you can actually type directly into form and submit complaints online, or is it a sort of download the PDF file and fill that out, or print out and then bring to the physical copy? Like, can you just kind of
Sure.
reiterate?
So the answer to that is DPD has been very permissive with regarding to accepting complaints. So we have, over the few 6 or 7 years we've been doing this work, a simple email to the chief or to us is enough to get an investigation going. You don't have to go through the rigmarole of complaint forms. It's just that there's some people that like the idea of a complaint form and want to put it on a form and then get a copy of the form so that they have a record that they've made the complaint. The complaint form is one option, but not the only option for complaining against Davis Police.
And it provides useful prompting structure to get information that may be actually needed.
It does. It does. It does provide that prompt. The other thing, though, is that, quite frankly, if it was up to DPD, they would prefer that the complainant come down to the station and talk to a supervisor, because that's the way to get things going right away. Otherwise, you got to fill the complaint or you got to reach out to the complainant. That may take a couple, 3 days. And so, unlike wine, complaints do not get better with age. So the sooner that, the department can get going on the complaint, the better.
Yeah, and then this is a question both maybe for you and also for Barbara. Sometimes we're sort of forwarded or we receive emails that involve some kind, that may involve kind of some form of complaint. How did we just forward that on to you basically, or if we see those, when those emails get to you, is that kind of handled? You're just kind of forwarding those on to administration of the PD, or if that happens, just trying to understand, like, if
Right.
it comes to the PAC, like how do those complaints kind of get?
Well, interestingly enough, I also acknowledge every email that comes to the city council, so it doesn't have to come to the PAC.
Yeah.
So we get complaints that need to be forwarded to police department, sent to city council. We get a few sent to PAC, and then those can be sent to Chief Henry, and then those are responded to, yes.
And just for clarity, for public sake, if we're doing a community outreach, we're talking to community members, we're interested in kind of understanding their experiences. It doesn't seem wise for any one of us to assert ourselves in this process of relaying information to the police department, but what would you recommend as a response if, say, we're talking to a community member and they're like, yeah, I had this experience and I, I don't feel good about it, or I feel something was wrong about it. Is the best option of response for that for us to basically say, send an email to, city staff or someone, or what is the response you guys would prefer? That we.
Michael
This
has
is Michael
something.
or to you both, frankly.
He wants to say, and I can add if needed.
Yeah,
I would say send it to me.
okay.
I think that, that way there's some level of insulation and objectivity with regard to whoever you're, talking with. Just say, be happy to send that on to the IPA. His team will get with you and we'll talk through the options that the complainant might have.
Okay.
And I, well, every single day I forward, items to various departments. I mean, that's what my day job is to give information to the public about how, they can, get their concern answered. So, it may not be something for PD, but it, may be something for Public Works. But yeah, I mean, it can be for PD. So I can also be a trusted source to pass that along and, feel free to, CC Michael in your capacity as a commissioner as well. So yeah, that's what I do every day.
And so basically what I'm just for my own recollection, I can kind of say, hey, let me, get you some information. I can maybe get the email address for you, Michael. Some people you may not want to just go, oh, go look on the website, like if I have the information, maybe I could provide that for them to be able to reach out to you directly.
And I'll ask the chief, what email that he prefers to give out to the public. And it's probably the one that's on the website, but just so you have clarity, because, once people find out you're on the commission, they may come to you and they want to know what to do.
Well, it's funny, I went to the police department today to meet with the chief and I spoke to somebody right outside, and why this comes up is just like, I was just kind of curious, like, what do you think about the police department? And then, then stories start to come up and you start to hear, some experiences and, some are, not so great. So it's like having that information just to be able to share in incidents like that when we are, trying to engage folks at maybe events or otherwise is useful.
Well, and there are some people that they want to file a formal complaint, and then there are some people who just kind of want to kvetch about it.
Yeah, totally.
Which
Which I think this was like one of the latter where it's just like, venting frustration.
well, but would you like to fill out a form? Well, no, I don't want to,
Yeah.
but
Exactly.
yeah, I mean, to Michael's point, I really like to hear that we welcome complaints, we welcome feedback, we welcome discussion. And that should, be the feeling that people get back from us as a city.
And I think it's appropriate and I'm comfortable, or I think it's appropriate and we sort of useful as in our role to, relay that information about the inquiry complaint option, basically like, put it out there if that's what if you feel like, you just want to understand, what could have been improved on in this response, even if it doesn't rise to the level of like misconduct or something, because some people may want some form of resolution, even if, it may be sort of a lesser than serious kind of issue, you know what I mean?
Right, and the chief ends up responding to a lot of emails, like especially if it goes to council. Or if I send something on to him, hey, can you take this one, can you help me, get this person to the help that they need? The buck stops with him and he's doing it, so that's nice to have.
When this subject has come up in conversations I've had with various residents, and we talk about the Police Accountability Commission, I always encourage them, although I have to admit, over the past 7 years, maybe 5 people that I've encouraged have ever come to a meeting, and few of them that have spoken. But I think we should encourage people to come to our meetings. And in addition to the other, I'm not in any way ranking these things, but when some people have something on their mind, they might welcome more than one route. And certainly Mike is a great resource, and it's not only is it good for the complainant, but it helps his work. As he's told us to receive these and know what people are thinking about. But if we could have more people, just, it becomes something that people kind of understand, and we might emphasize this when we do our public event this spring. We might want to have some item that would convey to the public that we meet once a month, that we welcome the public not only to listen to the entire meeting and comment on the various parts of it, but if anyone has a particular personal issue, doesn't even necessarily limit to complaints. It could be somebody wants to compliment the work a cop did, or they have a question about procedures and policies, training, or whatever, that they come to this meeting. And at some point, we might even be able to encourage some press coverage, which we don't ever get, because communication is the most important leg of the chair in these issues. Just getting it off their chest and obviously we have our limitations. We can't respond in the meeting to their complaint, but we can make it very clear that we appreciate it, that we understand it, and that we're passing it along to the chief or to the auditor and so forth. So again, I think we don't want to leave that leg of the chair out, that the public should be encouraged to either online, but best to come on over here. We have plenty of parking spaces in the evening.
Thank you. I do have a quick question about the police alternative conflict resolution program. And it says it's a pilot program. Is it being used and is it effective?
That's a great question. It's still an off-ramp for folks that want to try to mediate or just talk with the officer or the person that they have a grievance against. It hasn't been used lately. One of the problems is a former PAC member was a facilitator for that project, and she's no longer doing that facilitation. But if in fact there is a case in which the complainant or putative complainant that I talk with thinks that informal resolution might be the better way to resolve the case, that is still available.
So are you suggesting or recommending that maybe someone on this committee assume that position?
That's possible. I mean, if anyone has an interest in and has some experience in mediating complaints, it would be helpful, I think, to have somebody else. I don't know if Judith is still doing the work at all. I just haven't reached out to her recently because I haven't had a situation involving somebody who would like to go down that route. But earlier on, we had a number of cases in which that did happen and was successful.
Thank you.
When was the last time that process was used? And how many?
I would say about 3 or 4 years ago, if not longer.
What do you attribute that to? Because I would think that would be a constructive way to resolve certain complaints by simply explaining that this is police procedure and this is why we do things a certain way.
Yeah, I'm not sure I have an answer to that question. I just know that the people that I have ended up talking to were not interested in going down that road.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, open for public comment, seeing that there is none. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, the next thing is number 8, subcommittee updates.
Yeah, I can provide a
Oh,
quick
pretty.
update. For the outreach, with the holiday week, we had maybe been a little bit ambitious. We couldn't kind of get together before, but I wanted to ask, come to you maybe after the meeting to get Cecilia's email. I think the one on the roster is,
It keeps bouncing, I
Yeah.
noticed.
yeah, so the coordination effort, like, use a hand with that maybe.
Sure,
And then, and definitely, you know, talking to you, Don, already,
Oh, yeah.
we want to get a meeting in before the.
Yeah,
holiday.
we'll do it sometime in the next week or two.
Yeah, if we can get coffee, it's not a problem.
Any public comment? Seeing none. The next thing is the long range calendar upcoming meetings, and I do have a couple of questions for you. My question is a couple of things. Last week, Dawn had asked a question about the police department being locked, the doors being locked. The lobby.
yes.
Was there any information on that?
I sent a note to the chief and I don't think I heard back on that, but let me follow up.
Okay, and then the other thing is April looks pretty convoluted. Is there a reason that there's so much stuff on April? Or is that one thing?
So, it just happened that, this particular April 2025, those two reports were brought to you the same month. I don't know when the police department is doing that, so those are placeholders. And then, when we had the last iteration of the commission, we had identified April as a possible month for the outreach event. So those are placeholders, they could be changed.
Okay. Anyone else?
Yeah, I have, I have on the long range, shoot. Do you, go ahead,
Sure.
I need to collect myself, you have
Sure.
one of the questions I got.
So would it be possible, I don't know if this is count as long range, but have a meeting with the chief either in February, March to review their plan for the next picnic day? At least a month before the actual picnic day, kind of review their plans, review their new techniques or methods to deter or protect the public.
I will ask him.
Yeah, something came up for me, part of my day job professional capacity is as an attorney for children's rights, and I had a conversation with the chief, and what I learned about some of the work they're doing in investigations that I wanted to share with the rest of the commission. I don't know how many people are aware, but my understanding is that there's actually quite a bit of work hours put in by the department on child pornography and what are called CSEC cases, which is commercially sexually exploited youth, basically. These are, you know, very vulnerable youth, and there's a lot of overlap with sort of foster youth abuse and neglect and you know sort of other issues. And I proposed to the chief, and I told him I would ask the commission if you all were interested and would be willing to maybe vote to add to a long range calendar as an agenda item to get a presentation by somebody in the department to talk about that work, maybe bring some light to you know, how significant it is, what some of the data is in Davis, and what they're doing about it to address, you know, what are the resources we're putting to address, prevent, and ultimately stop, you know, crimes where children are the victim in Davis. So I would be happy to make a motion to add that to the long range
I was
calendar.
just gonna ask, do we have to make a
You
motion?
do not have to.
So we can.
Well, if you have general consensus, yeah, you can go ahead. But as we learned in our training, a motion always solidifies it.
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion
Okay.
that we add that to the long range.
Okay, we have a second. Any discussion?
Who's the second?
Any discussion?
Because in part, he actually told me too, that they do have some significant cases when I was visiting. So that is
Yeah.
They do put in a good amount of effort. It's not a small.
Yeah, I talked to one of the lieutenants who's moving to investigations with the retirement of another uh, person in the office. And in about 30 days or something, and he had explained just in the last few years they've had some pretty massive, multi-sort of $1 million, sort of
Okay.
large operations sort of investigations run. So I think it's really something that we could host here as a good venue to help, that just kind of
So could you
work.
put your motion in words, please?
Yeah, to just, it's simple. The motion was to
I think I
add to the long range calendar the issue of sort of child pornography and investigations through the police department, the efforts and resources they're putting into addressing basically crimes against children.
Did you get that?
Yeah,
Okay. And no other discussion, so all in favor? Aye. Okay. Anything else about the long range?
oh, I wanted to ask Michael, just as a placeholder, I had put. January for the taser use, auditor case reports, it's possible they won't be ready at that time. Do you happen to know, or what would you like me to do with that item?
I think we should be ready, but I can't guarantee it, but I would keep it on
Okay,
January.
we are, let me just look for January 5th would be the date, and I'm gonna also add all the actual dates, which I did while I was prepping for this meeting. So next time you will have a calendar populated with actual meeting dates. Okay, well, we'll keep in touch on that, Michael.
You bet.
Okay. Any public comment? Seeing none? We can adjourn.
Thanks, everyone. Let's go.
Have a good holiday and New Year, everybody.
Thanks, Michael.
Take
Thanks.
care.
Oh, this
Bye.
year.
Oh, because I'm.
Oh, yeah. So, yeah. Oh, thank you. Yeah. Probably see one of that.